Play Saves the World. Episode 1. What is work? Well, hello and welcome everybody to the very first episode of Play Saves the World. It's so good to have you here. My name is Daniel Hilty.
And my name is Kevin Taylor.
And we are so grateful for you joining us at the very first installment of this new podcast journey. But of course, as some of our listeners may know, this is not entirely the beginning of a new podcast journey. This is a chapter 2, right, Kevin?
Yeah, chapter 2 of re-envisioning.
Yeah. This podcast, of course, used to be called Board Game Faith. For over 50 episodes, we're exploring the intersection of board games, religion, and spirituality. And now we're kind of taking a new, we're broadening the scope, right, Kevin?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We're thinking more about play and human flourishing. So some of the things we've learned about board games and spirituality, we're now broadening that same message.
That's
you
right.
might think of it.
So what are we going to be talking about in this new podcast journey? Well, that is a good question. That's what we're going to be spending the next several episodes, or at least few episodes, talking about, including this. They're kind of like foundation episodes. And I use that word, Kevin, and I thought that was great. This kind of spending a few episodes setting the foundation of what we're talking about, including this very first one, what is work? And Kevin, this was your idea to talk in the first episode about what is work, and I think it was genius, as all your ideas are. What do you?
If only it were true.
It's true in my book. What were you? Would you want to talk a little bit more? What were you thinking about in? What were your thoughts in having this kind of first foundational episode be about work in this episode?
Well,
in this
you know,
podcast
Daniel.
about how,
It's a funny old world, isn't it? It's
It
just
is
a funny old world.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can only say what something is by saying what it's not. So darkness is the absence of light. You with me? Or,
Yeah.
for scholars, the sacred is whatever is not profane or secular.
I like
And
it.
the secular is whatever is not religious.
Right.
So
Right.
yin is known by yang, and yang is or yin is known by not yang, and yang is known by not yin. So that happens all sorts of ways and places. Prose is words that aren't poetry, and poetry is words that aren't prose. That kind of thing. So to get at what is play, if we want to try to say what play is, in some ways we have to say what work is, because play is whatever work is not.
Right, because these are two concepts that, right, exactly, that are so closely related that you really can't define and talk about one without talking about the other as well. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah. What was the Latin word that I've forgotten? But basically, for the ancient Roman Empire, in Latin, work was known as non-leisure.
That's right. It was something like that. I'm actually trying to look that up right now.
Negotium or something. Negotium. But
Yes,
your work
yes.
is defined by whatever's not your leisure pursuit. So we even see that in language, in Latin type thing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that. To negotiate comes etymologically from a word that means not at leisure. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but this idea that even in the ancient world, there was this sense that we define play and leisure in some ways in relationship to this closely connected
Yeah,
word,
and it happens
concept
with
of work.
other categories of thinking. So
Yeah.
it's not unusual, because the human mind is just a great big cavern of weird little caves and things. We just see the world in certain ways. So yeah, work is what is not leisure, but if we can get at work, then we can get at play. So that's why we want to start with what is work.
So how would you define work? What are some thoughts in your head on this?
Well, Daniel,
Yes.
I think a classic definition for work is intentional human activity. So it's not something you do by accident, like, oops, I just built a house, which would be impossible anyway. But gambling, for example, isn't work because it's mostly luck. I guess if you're a professional gambler, you are working because you are probably improving skills. But in general, if you play the slot machines, you're not actually intentionally doing anything. You're just the recipient of good fortune.
Right.
Right. So it's intentional human activity, but the trick is that activity isn't done just for the sake of the activity. It's for the sake of something else that's going to meet our needs or wants. So you work to get a paycheck.
That's so
the
good.
catch.
Yeah, it's a means to an end. It's not an end unto itself, right? Is that what I hear you saying?
Right. Absolutely.
I love that. So it's kind of intentionality plus means.
And it's activity
Right.
of some sort.
Right.
It's something you do.
I
You
love
can't-
that.
You can't work when you're asleep. Oh, how weird would that be?
Right. If I could work while I was sleeping, that would be.
I guess you could be a sleep. You could be a sleep actor. We need somebody asleep in this bed.
Honey, I've been given a gift. I can act sleeping really well. No one can act sleeping like I can. Right?
And look,
Watch
they're paying me
this.
for it.
He looks so real. Is he really sleeping?
Surreal.
No,
It's like he's
his
asleep.
gift. It's his gift. I love that. You know,
Versus the other guy who had insomnia, so he really did have to act.
that's right. Yeah.
He really was pretending to sleep because the whole time he was just there awake, wide awake. He had to hold his eyes shut because they would flap open immediately.
You know, spoilers, we're going to be talking probably this later on in our future episodes, but you're exactly right. I mean, that's something we've discussed in the previous iteration of this podcast, that the difference between means and ends really does get a lot at this difference between work and play, right? And I love this. So we'll be exploring what does it mean for an activity to be an end unto itself later on in future episodes. But you're right, but work is this intentional activity we do, but the goal of the activity is not in and of itself. It is a means to an end. It's not an end.
Right. So
into
you
itself.
farm so that you can feed your family. If you're in a certain time setting or time period or different part of the world, if you're in, say, America, you would farm so you can make money, so you can send your kids to college or something, or buy another tractor, or invest in your company, or pay off your mortgage. So it's always for something else. Even bartering, you would, I don't know, make little figurines that you could then trade at the flea market for something you actually want, type thing.
Right.
Like apples, something like that.
That's genius. I love that.
Yeah. So that's work. And what's interesting is work isn't inherently bad.
No, that's right. Yeah. Exactly. So I think that's an important concept, idea to get out here at the very beginning. We're not saying that, that work is bad and play is good. In terms of like this kind of this dichotomy, I guess we are saying play is good, though it can get bad, but we'll get to that in some future episode. But that's right, that sometimes work can be delightful in a way, though we often think of it as kind of a drudgery. But you talk about, well, for example, we're going to be bringing in kind of different spiritual traditions throughout the podcast. Though again, this is not about any one specific spiritual tradition, and no matter what your spiritual tradition, including no spiritual tradition, this is a conversation for all of us. It is about the role of play in human flourishing. But in the Judeo-Christian tradition, there is the sense of, as you talked about, Kevin, in our notes, that the sense of the fall of Adam and Eve, right? And when Adam and Eve eat that, we always say an apple, right? But Genesis doesn't say an apple. It could be anything. It could be a kumquat. But whenever they eat this forbidden fruit, the forbidden kumquat, they what's the they're what is the punishment, if you will? What appears to be work, right? But that's not necessarily the case. I kind of like what you put in our notes about this. You mind saying a little bit more about this story of
Yeah, and this came out of a Christian ethics textbook, but the implication is that Adam and Eve, and you don't have to take this story literally. You can take it as a narrative of beginnings, but
it's a metaphor.
So you can take it as you like.
Yeah.
But they would have worked anyway. They would have built cities. They would have made things. There would have been jobs. They're supposed to cultivate the land. Adam names the animals. So the implication is that they would still work. What happens as a result of the fall and sin entering the world is that work is now kind of cursed, that there will be thorns and brambles, that work will be difficult, and a beautiful line from the Bible that I've got to look at because I'll get it wrong, is that they will eat bread with sweat. So instead of being able to make bread, bread's something, it's not natural, it's something we make, it requires work, but instead of it being something pleasurable to make and eat, it is actually a lot of work to make, and then we eat it, but we're aware of how much work it took.
Yeah. Have you ever eaten bread with sweat? It's nasty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of salt in general, but not sweaty salt.
No.
Because bread with no salt is actually terrible.
No, it is.
There is salt in the recipe.
So
work originally would have, work can be pleasurable, and we can still see this. People feel a sense of accomplishment and purpose in their jobs. It gives them something to look forward to. They are part of a group or a team. They're making something. They're building something. The pleasure of creating something and also getting paid for it. That's really exciting. I remember when I first started working, it seemed so cool. Like, wow, I have this thing to do, and then they give me money. And money earned fairly is a good thing. It's not something to be ashamed of. In fact, that came up in the Christian ethics textbook too, that some people see money as so dirty type thing, and you'll see it in some churches where they don't want to put the offering plate on the altar because it's money, and everything on the offering table should be sort of godly things.
Right.
Like in some churches, you might have a Bible and maybe some flowers and maybe a cross. And again, as Daniel said, we don't mean this. This is just what we're mostly familiar with. That's why I'm going to the Christian culture and setting. But for some Christians, they felt like, well, the offering is money and it doesn't belong there. But actually, it really does. If you made the money and you chose to give it, it's just as holy as the flowers on the altar.
And it kind of harkens back to those kind of ancient concepts and so many spiritual traditions of offering a sacrifice on the altar of whatever you.
Anything worthy of pursuit requires sacrifice, whether it is the worship of God or it's marathon training or whatever. None of it comes from a magic checkbox type thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know, Kevin, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the good feelings of satisfaction associated with getting your first paycheck on something. Do you, not want to put you on the spot, but do you remember what your first paycheck was for? I mean, what your first paying job was?
I worked at a kind of gift shop bookstore in Winston-Salem at Renolda Manor called Hinkle's that has since gone out of business.
Okay.
Not due to me.
I'm sure you helped it to flourish.
I did what I could. Yeah, that was my first job. So it was a what do you call that? A shop type environment.
Okay. Yeah, like a little bookstore kind of thing. Oh, that's cool. Good.
It was like books and office pens, and so it's kind of a weird, probably why they didn't succeed. It was kind of a weird conglomeration of things you could buy there.
Yeah. Okay. Like a
what about you?
Gift and office supply store kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like you could buy pens and maybe some nice books and a scrapbook, like a photo album. It was kind of like a, I guess, home office type and adjacent items.
Okay.
Yeah. How about you?
I think my first paycheck was, over the summer one year when I was in school, I worked the night shift of a small screen printing T-shirt business in the basement of a building.
Okay.
And so I'd get there kind of as the night was beginning, and I wasn't skilled enough to run the machines. But I guess when you're screen printing, often there'd be like a little bit of, at least back then, there'd be a little bit of ink that would frequently kind of get on the T-shirts outside of the screens, like basically mistakes. And so I had this little acetone gun that I would shoot at the little ink spots that weren't supposed to be there, and they would dissolve the ink spots and get them off the T-shirts so that they were more pristine. And yeah, so that's what I would do.
Weird. So you weren't actually printing on the shirts; you were doing acetone gun repair.
Yeah, I was the cleanup. I was the cleaner.
Cleanup. Oh
the
my
T-shirt
goodness.
cleaner. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So that was mine. Well, that's cool. All right. Well, thanks. So yeah. So you're saying So there is this sense. Work. We're not saying work is bad. There can be a sense of delight and joy, and accomplishment, and even collaboration too. Right. In work. I'm going through a book right now. You mentioned intentionality earlier. I'm reading this book or listening to an audiobook that talks about one of the things that makes humans is shared intentionality.
Ooh.
That we can get together as a species and say, here's this huge task that we're not going to, that no one of us can accomplish on our own. So let's divide up the tasks. And you're good at this thing, so you go do this thing. And you're good at this thing, so you go do this thing. But together, each of us playing our role, we're going to accomplish this big thing that none of us can do on our own. And that shared intentionality is kind of what makes humans. And I love how you brought that in with your definition of work. Intentionality, activity, and this sense of a means to an end.
Yeah. Well, thanks. It was, I like how you built upon that. And I never thought of that we do have a shared intentionality. We can kind of create projects, and most of the time it does require more than one person. There are some projects that are individual, say an artist, maybe like a painter, or if you're homesteading. But in general, when we think of work, it always involves other people, with those notable exceptions.
Yeah.
Right. That you've got you've got others helping you. It's very hard to be a solitary worker. Although it is possible. It is possible.
Right. No, that's true.
But work is vital, and it gives people a sense of meaning and purpose, and it gives them a kind of freedom. And this can get into the sense of vocation, which is a particularly Christian idea that you might be called to do something. Now, people use it in non-religious, non-Christian settings, but as far as I know, it kind of comes out of the Christian tradition, the sense that God might have called you to do something in particular. So your gifts and your talents meet the needs of the world, and that's work. And that's a great and wonderful thing, to feel like you're called to be a creator or an artist or a pastor or a rabbi, whatever it may be. That you feel like this is what God or the world needs you to do. Right.
Yeah. What's that?
And
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, yeah, just that old quote about, I think it's Frederick Buechner, about where your heart's greatest joy and the world's greatest need meet is kind of your sense of call or vocation or something like that. But it's meeting a need in the world.
But it can be work too. It can be you also do it. You do it for the need, but you also do it because it pays your mortgage or your rent.
Right.
If you're a millennial.
But what?
Work and play aren't necessarily opposed to each other. That's another interesting bit. Is it can be both.
Right. That's what kind of complicates this conversation.
Yeah, you brought this up. More. This was good. I'd forgotten about this, to be honest.
Well, thanks. Yeah,
I was so making them into like a rap battle with only one winner, and I forgot that they could also do a combo rap song together.
One of the many things I value about you is your lens of seeing things through the world through the lens of a rap battle. That's
right. Well, I bring my own history to this podcast. Dan.
Yeah. Well, we're all a product of our history. We can go into that some episode. Back, what was your
Yeah.
rap name again? I forget. You sure you told me that before.
It was
Uh,
not slim, not shady.
not slim, not shady.
Not slim nor shady.
That's right. I remember that. It was hard to fit it on the T-shirts.
It
but I
was,
think
it
it
was.
was sort of the. But yeah,
The
but
surreal. Actually, the surreal, not slim, not shady, versus
That's right.
the real slim shady.
that's
Surreal.
But there's a good percussiveness to it. Surreal, not slim, not shady. I like it.
Yeah.
I forgot that, but that was a great name. I've got your T-shirt somewhere.
Yeah,
in the,
good.
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
back of the
it was-
closet. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that complicates it. And it's certainly not just. This is what other people have said as well, but that sometimes the distinction between play and work can be difficult to make. One thing you often hear in making a distinction between work and play, for example, is someone will say, "Well, it's about productivity." And what I like about your definition of work earlier, Kevin, is that you did not bring in productivity. It's this intentional activity. That's a means to an end. Because the truth is, productivity does not always distinguish work from play. Kevin, you and I have done kind of teaching on the subject of play in various areas and on this podcast and just in conversation with others about play. And one thing I think we've discussed before is in some of those settings is that, I don't know about other people, but I have had days at work where I get to the end of that day and I think, I have not accomplished anything today, or it just feels like a profoundly unproductive day. And now I've been busy all day. I haven't been lazy. I haven't been twiddling my thumbs, but it just feels like I haven't productive. So sometimes work can feel profoundly unproductive. And on the flip side, what we call play can sometimes be very, very productive.
Right.
If you are playing around with music, or with art, or the example that comes to my mind is, all of my other family members are really into this game Minecraft, and I sound such an old guy. This game called Minecraft that you may have heard of, into Minecraft, and I don't personally do it, but they will show me videos and they also show me they also show me what they've made on Minecraft. But then what others have done, they show on YouTube, these massive castles and computing structures and ships and everything that took days and days or weeks and weeks or months of work. And that is genuinely productive, but it's also play.
Right.
So productivity is not necessarily what distinguishes work and play. But and in fact, then Jane McGonigal, who is an author on play and work, Jane McGonigal says that she believes work is just play that we enjoy. I'm sorry.
Right.
Work is just play that. No, I take that back. Play is work that we enjoy. Play is work that we enjoy.
Play is work that we enjoy.
Yeah.
But vice versa, work can be play that we enjoy. If the work is if the parameters of your work are attuned to you and they're set in a certain way, work can be playful. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what her book is about, which is reality is broken, that we ought to make our work lives more like what we've learned from video games and play.
Yeah.
So there can be crossover and cross-pollination, and sometimes you can be so enjoying your work that it is a kind of play. You lose a sense of time. You get in what is known as a state of flow, where you are hyper-focused and you are taking a lot of pleasure in the moment, in what you're doing, and you lose a sense of time, really.
Yeah.
You don't realize how much time has passed because you're so engrossed in what you're doing. And that can happen in play. And that can happen in work.
Yeah.
So flow is not centered only in play. It depends on the work, though. If you are in a difficult work environment, say a factory or the gig economy where you're trying to zip around and take on you have to bid on certain jobs on your phone to either drive for Uber or Uber Eats or something like that, that is far from a state of flow.
Right.
So it depends on the work and your employer.
I think in
And I
moments
think about, like, say, board game publishers, which is really interesting because they must have gotten into it because they loved play, and they do play because they're play testing, and they've got to play other games to get ideas for mechanics and what people are buying. But it's also work. They've got to make a successful product that will pay their bills.
Yeah.
If it's their job.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting space to be in.
I got to know over the weekend this really great guy who was previously a professional football player. And he's a pastor now, but he's previously a professional football player. And he was talking about his experiences of playing football in college and then going on to play football for the National Football League, the NFL. Football.
Wow.
We're talking about American football here, of course, for our listeners around the world. It's what we call football in America. But I guess not soccer, which is the word we have in America for football in the rest of the world.
Right.
And I was just asking about kind of his reflections on playing football, American football in college as opposed to in professional league. And he said it was so much better in college, and we didn't really go into that too much, but I wonder if that was part of it, that the more something becomes an obligation or a means to an end, the less it feels like that playful sense of an end into itself,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's part of what makes hobbies fun, which hobbies are a type of play, right? That it's something that is not a means to an end, but simply done for its own pleasure. It's collecting, but it can become drudgery when it's taken too seriously, or you start a business, or I guess if your collection runs amok and you've got so many that it's overwhelming your life, then it becomes a kind of work or a cleaning almost versus the initial joy. And same thing with music, right? That you might begin playing music for fun, but if you start playing concerts and cafes or something, whatever your music type, then it becomes a type of work where you've got to show up and please the crowd and that kind of thing, and not have beer bottles thrown at you like in the Blues Brothers, right? Remember when they have to play Rawhide all night?
I'm embarrassed to say I've never seen the Blues Brothers. I'm so uncool.
This podcast is officially over. I haven't seen it in a long time, but there's a very funny bit where they've got a band and they're at a very rough sort of biker bar and they're behind a chain linked fence, and they realize that's because if they play the wrong songs, the crowd just hurls beer bottles at them and they're crashing. And so the only thing they can do to not get beat up or killed is to play Rawhide all night long. Giddy up, Rawhide. It's just a very funny bit of their mission as the Blues Brothers.
That's great. What I think that brings up, that the sense that one person's work can be another person's play, right? And another person's play can be another person's work. Yeah, yeah.
I've met people that love mowing the grass, for example. They really enjoy it.
Yeah. So it almost like the locus of what makes something work or play resides in our attitude toward it in a way. Maybe not, or our perception of it.
Yeah, or just personal preferences.
Sounds too easy. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say like just have a positive attitude and everything can be play. That's not true, but
a positive attitude can be cultivated, and it will help, especially if you're in a situation that you can't change.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do is try to change your attitude as much as you can to make it as good as you can.
Yeah.
So
one might
there's a place
say
for that.
Just whistle while you work.
Right.
And then
a spoonful of sugar.
It
helps the medicine.
It helps the medicine
go down.
Wasn't that one of your Not Slim, Not Shady songs when you were a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine?
Yep.
Yeah. But you never said what it made the medicine do. It was just a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine. And I like that about you. Was ambiguous?
You've got to leave room for the listener to
connect the dots.
What is medicine, right? You hear what I'm saying?
Right.
You feel me? You feel me?
it was deeply insightful social commentary about the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry. I liked it.
That's why, actually, if you look in the album liner notes, which for some reason I created, medicine was spelled S-I-N, medicine. See, so that really picked up on the question of who is the sinner and what is the sin in medicine.
That was so dope, man. I remember reading that, and we didn't know each other at that point, right? Yeah. And I was like, when I read that, I was like, I've got to become friends with this guy, with this not slim, not shady, because of medicine. And it was like, this guy's laying down some truth tracks. You
heard me. I was at a Waite Chapel parking lot, laying down some tracks, and you were parking there.
That's right. You were giving out the demo tapes to people as they were going by.
I was giving demo tapes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
8 tracks, unfortunately, because that's what I had. And you're like, this guy spits fire.
It was a steaming hot cup of tea, man. It was. All right. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. Anyways, but I think we probably made that point. But just the sense that work and play are not necessarily opposed to each other, right? And I guess one other thing I just want to get in there is this really interesting quote you hear often in play and work studies by Brian Sutton Smith, who says that the opposite of work is not play. He says it's depression. Oh. But I would say maybe some other word like hopelessness or a lack of feeling like you can influence the world around you. Depression can also be a clinical diagnosis, and I don't want. So I think that can kind of muddy the words. But just the sense of the opposite of work is a feeling, this sense of hopelessness that you cannot influence the world around you at all.
And that's interesting, and we probably will have to circle back to this in a later episode, because he's basically refuting the whole premise of this episode, which is that work is defined by being not play, and play is defined by being not work, with the awareness that there can be some crossover. And he's really rejecting that and saying that work, the opposite of work, is depression. So it's a bit more of almost what Kate McGonigal is doing, of saying that that work and play are more closely aligned than we think. Because the opposite of work is not play. For Brian Sutton Smith, it is depression. I guess meaninglessness is what he's getting at. You don't have, you're not acting on the world.
Right.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, we'll put an asterisk on that and circle back for
Sounds good. I like it.
For a later thought. Or we just find Brian Sutton Smith, lock him up, and then destroy all of his works, and then we don't have to deal with this because it never happened. It's called revisionism.
What?
If we don't put his stuff in AI, then in a few years no one will have ever heard of it because the AI won't have it. So we just need to put an AI blocker on his writings. What do you think?
That sounds good. I wonder we can have a guest. We could have him as a guest on the show too. And we could talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a violent person, Brian. Please don't believe any of that. I've never.
No.
I would never lock you up.
It was only
unless I was paid a lot of money.
It was only your stage persona is not slim, not shady. Yeah, it is.
My second album, Lock Up Brian Sutton Smith. That was not a real. Oh, we'll probably cut that out. Okay. Poor Daniel. Sometimes I get a little weird with my humor, and Daniel just has to endure it because he's far too kind to be as mildly depraved as I can be.
You're fine.
It's not real. It's not real. I just read too much Stephen King as a middle schooler. It's my teacher's fault, really. She read us Stephen King, Night Shift, in 8th grade.
Really?
My English teacher, yeah.
Wow, that's
And I was like, I must read more.
Wow. That is interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, back then that was probably 84. I mean, Stephen King was still young. Crazy.
But all of that aside, yes, clearly work can be oppressive, right?
It is very problematic for many people.
Yeah.
Why, Daniel?
Well, That's a great question. Part of it is in our previous podcast, we discussed this book, 4,000 Weeks, 8,000 Weeks by Oliver Workman, where he talks about the instrumentalization of everything, right? That how we feel like everything has to be in service to something else. And this gets exactly to what you were saying. It really was a good definition to begin with, Kevin. Your definition. Thank you.
I rewrote Wikipedia, so I can't take a lot of credit.
Well, it was still good. No, but this is a sense of work as means to an end. And if what we're doing, we're engaging, is a means to an end, if everything is geared toward accomplishing some future objective, some future goal, then the more that defines us, the less we are ever present in what is right in front of us, right? And we
Right.
lose ourselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually in the future, or perhaps in the past, and it rips us out of being present to the reality in front of us,
Right.
which
Well said.
all sorts of psychological traditions and spiritual traditions all agree is a bad thing for us, right? That robs joy, robs life of joy and meaningfulness and happiness. The less present we are to what is in front of us, the more life becomes burdensome. And then on top of that, valuing work to some sort of supreme good also justifies devaluing human beings, right? And it just makes us
Right.
cogs in the machine on probably the maybe one of the less innocuous levels. It means that people go to work and they don't feel valued. They don't feel like human beings. In some of the most horrendous forms, that results in enslavement of people. It results in child labor. It results in exploitative practices. But it makes human beings in service to the work and not the other way around.
Right.
What are your
Right.
thoughts
Yeah.
on
And
that?
you're dependent on market forces. So the thing you may want to do isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
And the thing that would give you the greatest joy is not going to pay enough for you to live off of, or maybe it's changed in terms of what the market demands, and the market is going to pay based on supply and demand. So so your wage is basically set by how many people there are competing for that job type thing, which may
Right.
mean you're not being paid much because your labor is cheap versus a livable wage, a sustainable wage. So yeah, you're dependent on who you are and where you were born. You may have really wanted and loved to have been an economist, but it's the 1930s and you're a woman and you're not encouraged or permitted to pursue that as a vocation or as education.
Right.
So it's not available to you. So you're very much dependent on who you are, where you're born, what the world economy demands from you. And you may be stuck in a factory doing what feels like very meaningless work. And you don't ever, this was Karl Marx's great criticism of factories, you don't make the whole thing that might be satisfying. You're not going to make the whole F-150 at Ford. You're just going to do the side panel on the passenger side. You're going to do one thing every day over and over and over. And you're paid by the hour, not for a complete thing you've made.
Interesting.
So as you say, it's a cog in the wheel. So you're alienated from your work in a sense, that the work
Right.
you could do, which is making something, you're alienated from it. You're paid by the hour to do one small thing that feels like drudgery.
Interesting.
Although some people, I have met people that do like factory work. There are some out
Right.
there, but it's very unusual. Most people find it very controlling, and as you said, a cog in a wheel. So that's the hard bit of modern work, that it can feel meaningless, it can feel unimportant. It's what they make fun of in all sorts of employment, movies about employment. If you think of Office Space, those types of movies, they're making fun of how working in an office can feel so empty. Brazil makes fun of that.
That's interesting. I mean, that concept about, you're only doing this one thing all the time, every day. I mean, in a sense, that kind of robs work of the sense of shared intentionality that we talked about at the beginning, that makes us human. That I'm not doing this so that it's part of this shared project. I'm doing this because it's just this is my task, and it's how I. It's what I'm. It's something that it kind of robs. It robs us of. It can rob a person of a sense of freedom as well. It can be very shackling and confining.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is what I have to do.
Yeah, so people can be very trapped by these jobs that can be very demanding, and 12-hour shifts, or factories that work day and night, or fast food places that are open day and night.
Right.
Yeah. And it's only getting worse now that people are ordering with mobile apps. You're not even interacting with human faces anymore.
Right.
You're just picking up a bag and running out the door. So any sense of pleasure, if I made this here, I want to see you, you're going to eat it, will enjoy it. You don't get that.
Right.
You just put stuff in a bag and you keep going.
And that gets at this sense of whether an action is voluntary or involuntary, which I think in future episodes we'll get to as a way of distinguishing play and work as well, voluntary versus involuntary. And someone might say, oh, well, unless we're talking about the enslavement of human beings, everything is a voluntary participation in work. In some sense that's true, but in some senses that's not quite accurate as well. In certain circumstances, having to participate in a particular form of work that eats away at the soul,
right,
is not a voluntary act. That person has to do that because that's the only way that they can survive.
Right.
It's not just a simple thing of saying, well, you chose to do this, so then we'll just go choose another job. Well, it's easier said than done. Easier said than done. You're right. I mean, if you're in a part of the world where there are no opportunities, if you're a part of a demographic or a minority where those doors are often closed to you, it's just not so. It's just not that easy. As for example, for someone like you or me, Kevin, just, middle-aged white guy in America, we have more options that are open to us than so many other people around the world and in our own country. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that pretends that we are sort of just these little pawns that are stripped of any individuality or uniqueness or racial, gender characteristics, that we're just these sort of automatons that can choose different. Well, I guess it wouldn't be an automaton, but yeah, we're almost more of robot, like all sameness that can pick things. It's a very Enlightenment way to think, but we don't live like that. We live as people that have a certain age and family and background and ethnicity and family and obligations and connections. So just dropping everything and becoming a different type of worker is not possible.
Right.
For human beings that live in history and time, it seems to me. Yeah, it's very naive and cruel thing to tell someone.
Yeah.
So a lot of this really culminates strangely as well particularly in the West and Protestant circles, or countries that are influenced by Protestant thinking, and more specifically Calvinist thinking. Yes. And Calvin is wonderful, and lots of Calvinist ideas are wonderful, but there is one that developed that's very strange, Daniel, and this is the Protestant work ethic that really comes out of Calvinism. And what is that?
Yeah, this is so fascinating. This idea that we've encountered in previous conversations in the other podcast, this idea that Kevin, you're the professor, and so you know a lot more about this than I do. But please correct me if I'm so. Jump in anytime and correct me if I get things wrong too.
Wrong.
But only a true friend would be so honest. Thank you. But the sense that just to oversimplify things, to put it in a nutshell, this idea that we're talking about Christian history here for folks outside of that history, but the Reformation, this idea in the 1500s of where reformers like Calvin and Luther and others tried to reform the church in many ways, including on kind of this theological point that we don't earn our salvation, that the salvation we receive is a gift from God. Now, what does salvation mean? That's another discussion for another time. But essentially, getting in good with God, whatever that means, is something we don't earn. It is something that we receive. That they were trying to correct what they perceived as a theological point in the church, that we can earn our salvation through our good works. And these reformers come along and say, no, it's all a good gift. Well, that sounds good, except we human beings can't seem to really tolerate that idea, right? This idea in Christian theology is often called grace, right? That our salvation, God's good gifts, we don't earn them. All we can do is just receive them gratefully and say thank you. We seem to really have a fundamental problem with that as human beings, that we seem to feel like we have to prove our worthiness, and so Calvin comes along and others and say, well, we can't earn our salvation, our good gifts, but here's something we can do. And I should say, maybe folks especially maybe develop more after Calvin as well, but the sense that we prove our salvation by our good works, right? We may not earn it, but we can show that we're in good with God by being good, hard workers, right? And this is how which is essentially saying the same thing, right? It's just going back to the same thing again, that we prove our salvation.
Except in some ways it's worse. because the
no
weird bit with the Calvinistic idea is you can't earn it, but you should act like you. But the only way to know you do have salvation is you probably will act like you were saved. So you have to do things that actually can't affect what you hope. If that makes sense. Like what you want is salvation, but there's no way to do anything about it. But maybe if you are a good worker, you're more likely to be saved.
Right.
Which is worse than at least the accusation of some of the pre-Reformation ideas, which were, if you do all the right things, you will go to heaven. Now you can't even do that. You just have to do them, and as you said, hope that they prove it.
Right.
But they can't. Or you're proving it without knowing, and you can't earn it.
Right.
So you're in a worse
it makes
situation.
it endless. There's
endless.
no end to it. You just
you could be faking, like you think you were, and you did all this good stuff, and you find out, nope, you didn't. You're not among the elect, because only God chooses who is going to heaven.
Right.
There's nothing you do about it, so you just wasted all your time.
And this is certainly a theme that came to be picked up by Protestants across many traditions and denominations.
Especially the Puritans and the Calvinists that were influenced by Calvin. It's really coming from a twisting of one of Calvin's ideas. Yeah.
Right. Not something necessarily.
It's not the Lutherans or the Baptists.
Core of one of his ideas. Right.
Yeah.
And so then we come to tie our sense of self-worth and self-value to our work. Right? If I have to work and I have to be productive to prove that I'm a good human being, to prove that I am in good with God, and in addition, I can even justify it to myself to demand work of others in a way that might appear cruel or exploitative, because work in and of itself is this highest good, right? Of proving God's favor. And so then folks like Martin Luther King Jr. come along, who was very critical of this idea of the Protestant work ethic, right? And he, for one thing, he said it was. He talked about this myth that's created around the Protestant work ethic, the sense that we've the Protestant work ethic is what's behind our societies today, where he says, largely what it is in the West is, building it upon the backs of persons who were enslaved or continue to be exploited through, unfair economic practices. But this idea that, if work is the highest good, then I'm okay demanding it of everybody, and forcing it on everybody.
And the reason those people over there, the reason they're poor is they're lazy.
Right.
And it's their fault.
Right.
So it becomes a way of moral judgment that if you are successful, it's because you're hardworking. And that may be true. It may be true. But it also may be for other reasons, such as inherited wealth or opportunities or just luck. Some people are just lucky.
Right, right.
But they conflate it with, well, it's because I'm hardworking, and the people that are poor aren't hardworking, which is often not the case. That poor people are working very hard. They just have few opportunities, or they're vulnerable, or they, in America, they might lack health insurance, and so they get sick, or financial catastrophe happens, whatever. And
Right.
It's not that they're lazy or they aren't hardworking. They just have had misfortune happen. So the Protestant work ethic has this really demonic power to it.
Yeah.
That it becomes a way of judging others. So people feel like if they stay busy and they don't take vacations, they're a better person.
Right, right.
That the goal is to complain how busy you are.
Right.
Which is actually really strange, because if you were good at your job, you would actually not be overwhelmed with busyness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right.
Like, by saying you're busy, it kind of almost implies you're ineffective, or it's a bad job, which could be.
Right.
Like,
but you're right. But we wear it as a badge of honor too. You're right. We talk about I'm so busy. I do that. Too. It just,
Yeah, we love
so
to complain
busy.
because because it's like, well, I must be doing something right if I'm always busy and overwhelmed, and
Right.
I don't have time to take vacations, and I don't have time for hobbies because I have to work.
Right.
There's
and
sort
that
of
becomes such a. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, self-congratulatory. What were you going to say?
Yeah, it is self-congratulatory. That's the perfect word for it. Yeah, it becomes such a cultural thing that we cannot even tolerate ourselves not being busy, even when we're not working. Right? Even like we're not at work, but we feel like that is a profound waste of time, and so even when we're not working, well, what do? We're busying ourselves by looking at social media, or just the sense that we don't know who we are and what it means to be, and we feel like there's a sense of worthlessness if we are not busy with something, right?
Idle hands are the devil's hands, or devil's work, or something.
Yeah,
we should always stay busy, even if we're unhappy.
Yeah.
The goal is to stay busy. And the dark side with this, too, is how it kind of works within capitalism, which capitalism can be a great blessing. But the dark side of capitalism is the harder you work, the more you want to escape that work. So you spend it on vacations or cruises or things that maybe you can't quite afford. Or by doing that, you can't do other things you might want to do. So you need to work even harder, or get a side job or a new job or side gig, so you can buy more things and take better vacations. So you're in this endless loop of working and spending.
Yeah.
And then if you lose your job, or you get hurt, or you get sick, or your family situation falls apart, you've lost everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you only worked so you could take your family on great vacations, and then the kids graduate and move out, what are you now? You have to recreate your whole self.
Right.
Just difficult.
Right.
Painful. So yeah, that some of this functions in terms of a getting and spending constantly, of the work ethic, and of how capitalism can play out in people's lives.
And it really leads to this sense of the end result of it, of people who often experience, I think so many of us in the West, in our corner of the world, experience this kind of profound lack of value and freedom and agency. Right? This agency defined as our ability to influence the world around us. That we're just, we kind of feel at its worst the sense of being trapped, and feeling kind of worthless.
Yeah, you're one paycheck away or one broken dishwasher away from having a real financial problem.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're very much trapped by your work and also potentially by your either difficult situations or maybe sort of spending habits that have taken over. Versus the nice thing about play is it can actually be free.
Yeah.
Or very cheap. I mean, you can get out there with the Frisbee and start throwing it with someone.
Yeah.
That's $4 fun.
Which is a great segue into what's coming up next in our future episodes. Right. This Kevin, I love how you wrap up this episode in our notes. You write there that just that work is often overwhelming, and it can't save us. Right. It can't save us. That it's not our true purpose is how you put it.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, no, that definition does work well. That work can be wonderful and it's great. And I mean, I would not want to not work personally. I find it an important part of my life, but it can overwhelm us and it can't save us.
Right. Yeah.
But we're going to suggest that play. I mean, it's not religious salvation.
Yeah.
But it's really close.
What can play do? Can play save the world?
Play might save the world. It might make us better human beings or more authentic human beings.
That sounds like a good teaser for me. Coming up on the next few episodes, how play can offer something better.
Right. So we'll explore what is play next time, and we will look for how humans are wired to play.
Yeah.
It's part of what makes us human and animal, because other animals play as well. Mm-hmm. And play that creates a certain freedom.
Yep.
And brings great joy.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Kevin, thank you so much. I'm going after this. I want to go out and mow the lawn. Speaking of work, but I'm going to make it more playful by listening through my headphones to the greatest hits of Not Slim, Not Shady. I'm going to call them up.
Not Slim, Not Shady.
your rap days. I'm going to do it. NSNS or NS2. Remember how you used to go by NS2? You stylized
NS2.
it. There's the NS2. Take your medicine. Yeah, that was great.
You be taking your medicine.
I like
in a bottle of gin.
I'm going to begin again.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're going to make your mowing the yard more playful, Daniel. Remember the time you tried to achieve that goal by tying a blindfold around yourself?
It was.
I think you were in Ohio by the time they finally found you.
At the time I thought it sounded fun.
Right.
I kind of regret it now. Yeah.
Yeah. You thought you would feel the edge of the pavement as you left the grass, but it didn't work. You just kept going.
I was not nearly as skilled as I thought I would be.
Yeah, it looked terrible.
And I had NS2 cranked up to maximum volume to my headphones, so I couldn't even listen to any kind of audio clues of anything. Yeah.
NS2 will transport you. Ooh, look at that ride.
All right. Well, Kevin, thanks so much. And to our listeners, thank you so much we're so excited that you're beginning this journey with us.
Yeah, we're excited, everybody.
Yeah, and we
Share
continue
the good news.
Talking about play next week and guests in the future and hobbies and games and music and art and all sorts of wonderful stuff. So
give us a like. Wait to begin. Follow us on social media. Play Saves the World.
Yep, we look forward to hearing from you. Oh, you can also reach us at playsavestheworld@gmail.com. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you, or if you have any ideas for future episodes.
Or if you have a carrier pigeon, how do you request a carrier pigeon? Do you know? You watch videos. Can you send them? You can't send them places. They only go home. correct?
That's
Or that's a homing
no,
pigeon.
they only yeah they only go home. By the way, I want to have a future episode about carrier pigeons.
We're gonna
I
do
want
it.
to find someone to talk about. To attain a carrier pigeon, there's you go to there's a carrier pigeon employment website. You go on.
Okay.
It's called
Squawk, squawk. Argar.
It's
.com.
LinkedIn for pigeons.
Okay.
Is what it is, and you go on, and yeah, and you
But if you send us a carrier pigeon, we'll be really impressed.
we will.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.